Well, hello and welcome to the CBN News Live Desk. My name is Dan Andros. It's being called a radical roadmap, one the National Education Association tried to quietly delete. A leaked 434-page handbook revealing shocking anti-Israel bias, Holocaust revisionism, racial quotas, and open hostility toward homeschooling. The NEA wants to tell your kids what to believe, but who's holding them accountable? Today, we are joined by Gary Lane, host of the Global Lane on the CBN News Channel, is here to discuss what may be one of the most aggressive ideological agenda pushes we've seen in American classrooms in quite some time. Gary, thanks for being here.
Glad to be here. Happy Friday, Dan. A lot has happened this week.
Yeah, I mean, let's start like right out of the gate here with this, what's going on with this handbook. I mean, the most explosive claim here, the handbook allegedly downplays the Holocaust targeting of Jews. So what did it say, and how is the NEA responding, if at all?
Well, can you imagine erasing the Jews from the history of the Holocaust and from Germany and Nazi Germany? And that's exactly what they've done. So what is reported is that they removed the reference to the Jews and said Hitler and his accomplices exterminated religious minorities, about 12 million of them. Okay, what happened to 6 million Jews? Why are you not specifically saying Jews? Sure, they killed others, but mainly they exterminated and had a policy of exterminating Jews and killed 6 million of them during the Holocaust. So why was that eliminated? Also, when it comes to Israel and the founding of the state of Israel, they're rewriting history there and talking specifically about displacements and about violence that broke out. And again, the message is Israelis and Jews bad, right? Look what they've done to these poor Palestinian people. And there's no mention of the truth and reality or the back history of what led up to the creation of the state of Israel.
So, I mean, why do you think that, well, first of all, let's back up here. I mean, we know that education institutions in America have progressive leanings. Is this kind of one of the more radical steps you can recall seeing in recent years?
Yeah, I would say it's probably the most radical since they advocated the lockdown and or the clearing out of our classrooms, right? Removing kids from the classrooms during the COVID pandemic, requiring them when they came back to mask and stay 6 feet apart, even though we now know that Fauci just made all of that up. Where did the 6 feet come from? Oh, I just guessed. I just figured that. So where was the science in all of this? So now, why should we trust them about anything? Why should we trust them if you can't trust them on that? What else can't you trust them on? Well, now they have a teacher's manual in 2025 that is very bordering on anti-Semitism. I don't think it's by accident they've done this. And it's the NEA is the largest teachers union in America. They weren't the first to advocate the lockdowns and the COVID response. The American Federation of Teachers was more aggressive in that, but they went along with it. And now they've got this. So, Dan, I think they've totally gone woke. They really have a leftist agenda from the leadership. Now, not the teachers. A lot of the teachers will probably look at this manual and say that's hogwash. I'm not going to teach that. But the fact that it is actually in the teacher's manual, how did that happen? Why? Who's behind that? Who's responsible?
Yeah, I mean, and there's other stuff in here. We're going to focus on sort of the anti-Israel, sort of anti-Semitic kind of themes that we're seeing, not just here at a teachers union, but also being pushed in popular culture and elsewhere on podcasts and whatnot. We'll get into that in a minute here. But, talking about going woke, I mean, another couple of things that this handbook pushes is also the so-called white supremacy culture narratives and essentially illegal racial quotas. What are some of the consequences of these ideas for students and teachers? It also attacks homeschooling as well.
Well, I think the consequences are you build up resentment and hate among minority groups against the majority, and vice versa, the majority against the minority, because hey, they're oppressing me now, and it's dividing the society. It's dividing the society, and you have to divide the society before you can conquer it and rebuild it. And I think that's what many of these leftists believe. It's really communist ideology. I've seen it in my days reporting from the Soviet Union, also from communist China and Cuba, elsewhere, where communism has taken hold, or did take hold back in those days. It's a tactic. You divide the people, you control what they think, what they're taught, and then you can control them. If you conquer and divide, you can control them and then implement your agenda. So what is the agenda? The agenda is a very left-wing, controlling agenda of DEI. Everybody is equitable. There's equity. Everyone's the same. And as you know, Dan, whatever happened to merit? Whatever happened to those who work hard in school and study and study for their testing, and they get A's and they advance? Well, you've got two parents in your household who helped you, study the test, so you have an advantage over kids who don't have to. Well, okay, then how about providing them with tutors who can help them instead of leveling the playing field, making everybody the same, and we aren't the same when it comes to our accomplishments. There we are. That's what's happening.
Yeah. Now, what do you think, Gary? Imagine you're a Christian family, maybe through whatever situation you're in, your kids are in public school. What recourse do you have at this point? I mean, how do you push back against this? And like you said, maybe some of these teachers are going to sort of brush it off, and perhaps it won't be an issue. But what should parents do? How can they push back? And do you think the NEA, with all their influence, do you think there's going to be any blowback for them on this, or is this sort of business as usual for them?
Well, I'd say, Dan, for parents, it's being aware, first and foremost, of what's being taught in the classroom, being aware of the materials that your children are bringing home, the textbooks that they're looking at. Ask them, hey, what'd you talk about today in school? What did you learn today in school? This is how you find these things out. And then you go and you have a legitimate discussion with the teacher to find out more. What exactly are you when you have a parent-teacher conference, or request one and find out what is being taught? Then, if it's something that you think is not correct, then you have a responsibility to point that out to the teacher. If you don't get a response there, then go to the school board. I mean, parents need to go to the school board. They need to be involved and stand up for parental rights. But the reason a lot of this has happened is because parents aren't educating their children. They're taking a laissez-faire, a hands-off attitude, and just let the schools educate my child. And I've told my children, and I've said this to others as well, you as a parent are the number one person responsible for educating your child. It isn't up to others. They can assist you and they help educate your child, but it's primarily up to you. So if you don't like what they're teaching and you don't get anywhere with the school board or with the teacher, pull them out of school. You can homeschool. There are many organizations that support homeschooling. There's also charter schools. Think about that. Now, I know they're costly, but you have to weigh it. Okay, what is more important, my child's education, or me maybe buying a new car or waiting on that new car for a couple of years?
Right, or having them end up like, I mean, we're seeing in the footage here. I mean, these are from all of these college protests that have been going on. I mean, you leave them to fend for themselves and their ideas. I mean, that is not the time to do that when somebody's growing up and learning. They're going to be heavily influenced, particularly in colleges and universities, where we see this sort of far left bias playing out on this. And like, let's talk about this, Gary, because I think we're seeing some anti-Israel, anti-Jewish sentiment, not just from the usual sort of far left suspects that we've seen in the past, right? That anytime Israel does something, you could always count on folks from the far left to be critical and support groups like Hamas or any Palestinian, even extremist groups that are fighting against Israel. They always seem to lean towards that side of the aisle. But we're also seeing this kind of crop up on the right. So, and then also these, I guess, neutral podcasts. You see big podcasters that are label themselves comedians, but now I never see anything funny from them, Gary. I just see them talking about Israel and complaining about Israel and blaming them for all of the world's problems. But these are people, you could brush them off, but they have millions of followers. Like, this isn't nothing. This is something we can't just put our head in the sand and just say, well, that's just some goofy podcaster. Well, it's a lot of people doing this now. And the questions they're raising, what's interesting to me is there's so many of them are so detached from any semblance of truth, Gary. How do we combat this with truth when people are just being fed stuff and they're being, I don't know, flooded with content now? So much so that I think the academic rigor and any serious academic look into a historical issue like the Holocaust is just not done by people. They're being more influenced by these podcasters and such. So what do you make of that move, especially from the center right or far right that are kind of inching into that anti-Israel area? What do you make of that?
Well, Dan, years ago, my father told me, he's deceased now, but years ago he told me, he said, Gary, if you go far enough right and you go far enough left, they meet. And I think this is what's happening today. The far left and the far right are very critical of Israel, and they have also Jews. They have become very anti-Semitic. I don't know why people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owen, I mean, what's going on with them? I mean, they're conservatives that have a large following of people. And why have they changed? Why has there been this shift? I've always liked Tucker Carlson. I met him years ago, interviewed him. I think he was working for Human Events at that time, or some conservative publication. Right. And I found him to be a very thoughtful guy. But it's like, Tucker, what's happened to you? Why suddenly are you anti-Israel? I mean, it's one thing to be protectionist for America, and you don't want to see America involved in these never-ending wars. I don't think any American wants to see us involved in never-ending wars. But there's times that you have to take a stand, especially for your friends, and defend them. It's like standing up to the bully in the schoolyard. But what's up with this anti-Semitism now from Tucker and people like Tucker? And as you say, Dan, look, it's all over the place on social media. So what do we do about it? I mean, you can advocate censorship, but that's not good. We believe in free speech in America. I remember Jonathan Turley told me once, he said, we don't need less speech, we need more. We need more speech, more free speech. And that's how we combat this. We have to be more aggressive in getting the truth out there. And I think that's why CBN News does exist. This is why I have worked for CBN News and started working here in 1984. I've been here all along because I believe that we're putting out the truth and from a Christian perspective. And we need more of that. We really do.
Well, yeah, especially because even on like the basic stuff, because I'm seeing that question. I mean, you mentioned Tucker, and one of the clips that went viral for him was he had a guy on that purports to be some kind of historian. And he was saying on there that he was essentially painting Churchill as the warmonger in the situation. And, in a roundabout way, that's sort of the vibe that he was leaving. Also made claims that Hitler didn't really try to systematically gas the Jews, that they had just starved because they had so many prisoners of war, and it's hard to manage that many. And so you hear stuff like that, and it's being presented by someone who's kind of positioning themselves as an authority and somebody who has studied this stuff and knows this stuff. I mean, we're going to have some kind of turn, Gary, back to really studying actual history and how do you discern the truth from these narratives here? Because people are spinning stuff, and not to pile on Tucker, but another one I saw him talking about was World War II and the dropping of the atomic bomb, and he was trying to argue that there's no possible scenario in which America is not the immoral person in this scenario. And my grandfather was out on a ship in the Pacific Theater in World War II, and he told me that he, more than anyone, was glad that was dropped, because if it wasn't, he and thousands of other Americans were going to have to go inland and try to take the mainland, in which they wouldn't be fighting against just soldiers. The Japanese were telling their men, women, and children all to fight to the death if the Americans came in. So could you imagine that scene? So it's obviously horrible, and war is horrible, but the goal of war is to end the war. And obviously Japan wouldn't surrender. So, but anyway, but just things like this, I feel like we're getting so much revisionist history when it comes not just to that, but particularly with Israel.
Well, when it comes also, you mentioned World War II. I mean, my father trained troops for the Pacific Theater. And he told me, he said, Gary, we had to do that. We had to drop the bomb on Japan, on Hiroshima, and then again on Nagasaki. He said, because there would have been more than 1 million people probably that would have died after that if we hadn't done that. As you say, an invasion of the mainland there. And that would have gone on and on. And think of how many lives would have been lost there. I'm not justifying dropping the bomb. I can understand why it
Right.
was done. It's a horrific thing. May it never happen again. Uh, Back to college campuses, though, and what's going on there. Uh, I talked to Jonathan Tobin from the Jewish News Syndicate this week, and he was talking about the Columbia University settlement. It's a $200 million settlement with the government over 3 years. They'll be paying about $200 million. In addition to that, I think there's like $21 million that is a settlement with the EEOC because that's for the employees who they felt their civil rights were violated, their rights for equal employment and at Columbia. But the 200 million, that's violating the rights of the Jewish students. Can you imagine paying all this money for tuition at Columbia and you go to attend classes, you can't even get into the class because you're a Jew and someone sees a Star of David on your neck, or they see you wearing a kippah, or they know that you're Jewish and they block your access and start shouting things at you, anti-Semitic words, and then you turn and you see a swastika that's painted on a wall. I mean, these students were frightened. They couldn't go to class. They were frightened for their security and their safety. And guess what? Columbia did nothing about it. Well, now it's holding their feet to the fire. They're going to be required to do something about it, at least pay $200 million in fines and then another $21 million to the EEOC in those settlements. And then Harvard, I guess, is getting ready to settle one for as much as maybe $500 million. UCLA settled a lawsuit there for $6 million with Jewish students at UCLA. Look, it's one thing to allow protests. It's another thing to allow the protesters to spread hate, violence, and shut down your university and block access to students and employees. And that's what the government stood up against. Now, what Jonathan told me, he said, Gary, this isn't just a victory for Jewish students. This is a victory for all Americans. Because at least at Columbia, what they've done is they've gotten rid of their DEI program now. And the DEI program, with all these woke policies, led to this situation, or at least didn't do anything about it when the rights of a certain segment of the student population, when their rights were being violated. So it's good for all of America, and that's what happened at Columbia.
You mentioned one of your guests there, Gary. Can you tell us who else you have, what else you're covering on this week's Global Lane?
Well, what else on the Global Lane this week? We start out, as I had mentioned, Jonathan Tobin. In addition to talking about these settlements with the universities, the anti-Semitic legal settlements, we also talk about France and Britain and Canada threatening Israel, saying, look, if you don't end this Gaza war and agree to a ceasefire in September, we're going to recognize a Palestinian state. And what Jonathan said is this is rewarding terrorism. You're basically rewarding Hamas, and it will keep the fight going because they'll see it as a victory against Israel. So we have to be very careful about how the timing also. September, think about that. What comes just a few weeks after that? October 7th. What a slap in the face that would be to Israel. Not to mention supporting. Now, look, I've got to say, Canada said we don't want to see a government, a Palestinian state established that will be ruled by Hamas. We want the Palestinian Authority. Well, the PA is no different than Hamas. Maybe they don't have the rockets and the arms that Hamas did in the tunnel system in Judea and Samaria in place, but you look at their charter still calls for the elimination of the state of Israel. They're still pledged to fighting Israel and destroying Israel from the river to the sea. That's anti-Semitic, that statement in itself. And then in addition to that, they're still paying their people to slay Jews. You go and kill a Jew, you get rewarded for that. If they kill you as you're trying to do it, or if you're thrown in jail, then your family gets a lot of money. And that's American tax dollars have been going to that over the years. So we talk about that. And another segment, Dan, that I think you'll find of interest. Of course, we mentioned the NEA segment. We're talking about this development with the NEA and their manual, and that was good. But we also have one that takes a look at Donald Trump's first 6 months of the first year of his second term. What a wild ride that has been. And do we need to call into question the slowness of the progress on things like Epstein and also going up against the deep state at the Department of Justice and the FBI, or do we need to be just patient? Well, the guest that I interviewed said we need to be patient. A.J. Rice, some of you may know him. He's a conservative publicist and an author, a little bit on the humorous side, but we enjoyed talking with him. So catch it. You can catch it on the CBN News Channel, also on YouTube.
All right. Looking forward to that, Gary. And as always, appreciate you hopping by here at the end of the week to discuss what's coming up on your show and the things going on. This is obviously a very important issue, and we're seeing some trends that are very, very disturbing. And so we're definitely going to keep you informed on it because, like I said, this is something that we cannot be burying our heads in the sand, just hope it goes away, because there are very prominent people that are pushing these things. So as long as they continue doing that, they're going to get people to fall in line kind of with what they're thinking. They're going to convince people. And like you said, we at CBN need to keep pursuing and reporting and showing people the truth. So Gary, appreciate it.
Dan, we just try to keep digging a little deeper and exposing the truth to people when we uncover it. So we appreciate you. We appreciate everyone watching and watching CBN News.
All right. And thank you all for watching, as Gary said. And make sure you're checking out, by the way, the Quick Start podcast, all of our CBN News podcasts. You can catch Gary's show and podcast as well. Make sure you're looking for those. You can find them on cbnnews.com. All right. God bless you. Hope you all have a fantastic weekend. We'll see you next time.